Hello and welcome to my class. So, this is a special session as this special document was released by the Government of India. भारत सरकार ने ये खास डॉक्यूमेंट जो है वो रिलीज करा है 2024 में। जनवरी के महीने में ये डॉक्यूमेंट आया था इकोनॉमिक रिव्यू के नाम से। तो भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था का रिव्यू भारत सरकार ने किया है। पिछले कई सालों में भारत सरकार के क्या अचीवमेंट्स हैं, यहाँ पे उन चीज़ों पे फोकस करी गई है। द फोकस हैज बीन ऑन द अचीवमेंट्स डन बाय द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया। अदर देन दीज अचीवमेंट्स, हाउ हैज द पोस्ट कोविड रिकवरी बीन? पोस्ट कोविड रिकवरी किस तरीके से रही है, और पोस्ट कोविड रिकवरी के बाद अगर हम आज की डेट में भारत का ग्रोथ रेट देखें तो वो ग्रोथ रेट किस हद तक पहुंचा है, ये सारी चीज़ें हमें इस डॉक्यूमेंट के जरिए पता चलेंगी। Because this document comes from an official source, it is released by the Government of India, I want all of you to understand and memorize all the things that we are studying as a part of this document. It might be asked in the examination. 2024 के prelims में ये चीज़ें आपसे पूछी जा सकती हैं। डॉक्यूमेंट का जो नाम है वो है इंडियन इकोनॉमी सिंस 1950। ये डॉक्यूमेंट का नाम है, और इंडियन इकोनॉमी अ रिव्यू, दैट इज द पेरेंट डॉक्यूमेंट। ये जो डॉक्यूमेंट है तकरीबन 80 पेजेस में, 80 पेजेस में रन कर रहा था। इन 80 पेजेस के डॉक्यूमेंट को हमने कंपाइल करके लिमिटेड स्लाइड्स में मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशन आप लोगों के लिए इंक्लूड करी है। उसके कई सारे मैं आप लोगों को ट्रैपिंग्स बताऊंगा कि कहां कहां क्या क्या पूछा जा सकता है। कई सारे फैक्ट्स हैं, कई सारे फिगर्स हैं जो आपको याद रखने पड़ेंगे। सो वी आर अबाउट टू स्टडी इंडियन इकोनॉमी रिव्यू सिंस 1950। तो सबसे पहले अगर हम इस चीज को कंटिन्यू करें और देखें भारत अर्थव्यवस्था किस तरीके से सन 1950 से लेकर 2014 तक और 2014 से लेकर आज तक प्राइमरीली 2 फेजेस में इंडियन इकोनॉमी को डिवाइड किया गया है, और इन्हीं 2 फेजेस के जरिए मैं आपको यह समझाऊंगा कि कैसे भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था 10th लार्जेस्ट इकोनॉमी से 5th लार्जेस्ट इकोनॉमी तक जो है वो पहुंची है, और 5th लार्जेस्ट इकोनॉमी से वन ऑफ द टॉप 3 ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमीज ऑफ द वर्ल्ड जो है वो बन जाएगी अगले कुछ सालों में। ये जो तब्दीलियां हैं ये हुई हैं पिछले 10 सालों में, लेकिन जैसा मैंने बताया पहले हम पढ़ेंगे कि पहले 10 साल, द फर्स्ट 10 years, व्हाट हैज एक्चुअली टेकन प्लेस, क्या चीज हुई है। तो इंडेक्स का जो पहला टाइटल है वो है इंडियन इकोनॉमी फ्रॉम 1950 टू 2014। 1950 से 2014 तक क्या क्या हुआ है इन फेजेस में मैं आपको ब्रीफ में ये चीज बताता हूं। सो व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट इंडियन इकोनॉमी, इट कैन बी डिवाइडेड ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ नेशनल इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज। आई रिपीट, इट कैन बी डिवाइडेड ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ नेशनल इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज। 1950 से लेकर 1991 तक भारत सरकार ने कई सारी इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज बनाई। इन इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज के जरिए बहुत सारे चेंजेस आए। देयर वर मल्टीपल चेंजेस दैट वर इंट्रोड्यूस्ड वाया दीज इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज। सो चेंजेस लाइक लाइसेंस राज was introduced in the year 1956. Via the economic policy of 1956, we categorized the industries. Categorization of industries was done. When we are talking about categorization of industries, industries were categorized under category A, B, C, depending on which sectors are reserved for the government, which sectors are reserved for the public sector, which sectors are open for the private sector to invest. This kind of categorization was done. What kind of economy would India follow? Would it be a closed economy or an open economy? This is something that was under discussion, closed or open economy. Followed by that, what are the taxes that the government of India would levy on goods which are manufactured in India, goods which are sold in India? These were the things that were focused upon. So all of these things were talked about via various economic policies that were framed from the year 1950 up till 1991. Multiple policies were framed, like economic policy of 1956, limited economic policy of 1969, economic policy of 1971, 1980s, and finally up till 1991. We are not yet talking about the policy of 1991. So this is something that was done. Then we talk about economic policy. Economic policy of 1991. This is the policy of 1991. What was done during this policy? So economic policy of 1991, this entire policy was focused upon as a part of the reforms, the path-breaking reforms that India had never adopted before that. These reforms were called as LPG reforms: liberalization, privatization, globalization reforms. When we are talking about these reforms, what were the changes that were brought into place? What were the things that had to be included? What all changes were brought into place in order to effect that we are opening our economy for the entire world? That is called globalization. When we are giving freedom to the private sector to operate, because private sector needs freedom. Public sector, government does not need freedom. Government already has all the power in the world. So private sector was given the freedom, liberalization, and the private sector was allowed to operate in those areas, the areas which were reserved by the government for themselves. It was called privatization. Liberalization, privatization, globalization, all three things came about as a part of economic policy of 1991. Further to it, there were multiple developments that took place. These developments focused upon making sure that we were going ahead with respect to whatever changes that could happen in India with respect to our development. So on this particular basis, when we are talking about this economic policy, these changes took place, and these changes, they continued from the year 1991 up till 2014. And later on, with effect from 2014, there were multiple more changes that we'll see during the course. So the first phase of Indian economy is from 1950 to 1970. Now these are the figures that were stated. I have only included the important things, and trust me on this that you have to focus on the revision part, right? 1950s, 3.9% of GDP growth. This was the rate of growth, and we had escaped the shackles of the British, or rather we were freed from the shackles of the British. So we were reviving our economy. We were recovering from a huge exploitative mindset, colonial mindset that had destroyed the Indian economy in the last 2 centuries. 3.9% of GDP growth, and the focus was on primarily government-owned enterprises. Followed by that, in 1960s, the growth rate increased to 4.1% of GDP because of the developments that were done in the first decade of independence, 1950 to 1960. In that decade, there was focus on heavy industries like steel. There was focus upon making sure that government of India focuses on education, the new education policy, the new health policy. This is something that was done during the 1960s. Then what happened was that 1960s was marred with too many crises in India, starting with the Sino-India War in 1962. So 1962, the China-India War took place that destroyed the Indian economy again. It was a huge burden on Indian economy where we did not have enough funds to fight the war. And obviously, if we are redirecting our funds to fight the war, obviously we cannot focus on economic growth. We were recuperating from the war that just took place with China. Then again, a war happened with Pakistan in the year 1965. These were the two wars that became a huge economic burden on the nation, and revival from it was difficult. But during the same time, India was facing the worst drought in a span of 100 years, and since we have not faced any drought since then till date. This was during the mid of 1960s, 1963, 64, 65, 66. We haven't faced any drought since then. It resulted into the death of 2 to 3 million people at that point of time. We lost lives. And then we had leadership and political crisis. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister, expired. After that, Lal Bahadur Shastri became the Prime Minister. He also expired. And then, or rather I should say that, he died under mysterious circumstances. But followed to that, what happened was that multiple developments took place on the front of leadership. There was a division in the Congress, no stable leader. So this entire decade was a wasted decade when it came to economy. When Indira Gandhi became the Prime Minister, finally things started to stabilize with effect from 1969. Drought in 1965, high rates of taxation, pervasive control of the economy. Then finally in 1970s, from 1970 to 75, multiple developments took place like Green Revolution, like nationalization of banks, India winning the Mukti Bahini war, India doing the Smiling Buddha one, India also making sure that it ranks high in terms of production of food grains and exporting food grains eventually. Going towards focus on Project Tiger, National Tiger Conservation Authority, economic environmental laws came into place. So the first 5 years these things happened, but the GDP growth declined because of the emergency that was declared and the prospective consequences of emergency, that there was no work that was happening. Followed by that, there was an oil shock in 1973. What we mean by oil shock is that the war whenever there is a war in the Gulf, war means war between Iran and Iraq, war between Iran and Saudi Arabia, war between Iran and Israel. So these kind of wars, they result into oil shock. They don't have, so these countries, Middle East countries that are sitting on wells of oil, they don't charge taxes from their people because they make money from oil. If they have to fund a war, then they increase the prices of oil. So that becomes an oil shock for countries like India because we are dependent on oil. If the prices of oil increase, then we will go in an oil shock because we have to shell out more funds. So oil shock happened. And there was political instability because emergency of 1975 led to disbanding the government. Indira Gandhi lost elections, Janata Party came to power, which also was an unstable government because it was a coalition government. Then eventually in 1980, again Congress came to power, Indira Gandhi became the Prime Minister and a stable decade started to exist, which resulted in 5.7% GDP growth. You have to remember all these figures. So what happened during this decade? Price controls, excessive prices that were controlled of goods and services to be sold by the government, they were let go of, price controls were removed. Initiation of fiscal reforms, very, very important. So many liberalization measures, they started before 1990. Revamp of the public sector had gone to dogs. Public sector banks were sitting on high NPAs. Public sector undertakings were not doing well. Eventually, they have to be looked after. So reforms happened in public sector. Import duties were reduced so that people in India would import items and then they could sell them in India, or at least we would have availability of items. This is a part of liberalization, by the way. This is a step towards liberalization. And delicensing of the domestic industry. Domestic industry has to be delicensed. So look, delicensing means that licensing is no longer required, but this is something that took place in a very minimal scenario. It did not take place much. Hence, it was a step towards liberalization, but license still used to exist. This happened during 80s, which resulted into a 5.7% of GDP growth at that particular point in time. In 1991, India undertook LPG reforms where government of India started offering incentives. Like government of India is doing now, it is offering incentives in the form of PLI scheme, production linked incentive schemes. At that point of time, the scheme was export incentives and import reduction in duties. Removal of price controls entirely. They could fix prices on the basis of market forces, and end of license Raj. Inspector Raj actually ended, which means something that was introduced via 1956 policy that was abolished. Then came the new millennium, the year 2000, a very stable decade up till 2008. So 6.3% of GDP growth, a very stable economy, India rising, India shining, better corporate performance, which is a conducive investment climate. It is a better corporate performance. Companies started to come in after the bubble burst, the tech bubble burst in the US. So many corporates, they started in India, and because of the influx of technology, they were able to provide goods, they were able to provide good services. So India was and still is thriving on the service sector, tertiary sector. 2008 global financial crisis happened. It ruined the economy globally, but India was less affected. I would not say India was not affected, India was less affected. This started in the US in the form of a housing-led crisis, and its spillover effects were seen in the entire global economy. Thereafter, 2009 to 14, what happened? The government tried to sustain high fiscal deficits, This was a time where too many scams were unearthed. Coal scam, which was also called Coalgate, 2G scam, 3G scam, Robert Vadra scam, right? And then there were other scams like CWG scam, Commonwealth Games scam. So these were the scams. India experienced annual double-digit inflation rates during 2009 to 14, and Indian rupee depreciated by 5.9%. Up till 2014, Indian economy transitioned from a closed economy to open economy. This happened in 1991. You should remember that India, or for that matter, no economy in the world is theoretically an open economy. It cannot be, because open economy means completely leaving it open for every sector, but that does not happen. Certain sectors are still under government jurisdiction. When we talk about the open sector, openness happens on the basis of mixture between closed and open economy, or there are characteristics of closed economy and open economy that every country adopts. That is what we call as open economy. Transition from public investment to coexistence of public and private investment. Technology began to be identified as a key growth driver. Focus on technology. This can take you places. So this is what happened, and this bureaucrat states it was through the path of techno-nationalism that India developed self-reliance, Atmanirbharta, through its technologies in both civilian sectors as well as strategic sectors such as space, defense, nuclear energy and supercomputers. A very good line. This can be used in your essay paper for mains. This was stated by R.A. Marshalkar. Then came about 2014 to 2024 era, this decade. During this decade, India came from being the 10th largest economy to 5th largest economy. So robust and resilient growth in the last decade. Robust growth, resilient growth. India's economy jumped from 10th to 5th largest economy. India emerging as the fastest growing economy among G20 economies. So amidst G20 economies, India is the fastest growing economy. This is something that has been stated. We will just understand what is the rate of economic growth of India pre-COVID and post-COVID, both. So what happened during COVID? Pandemic obviously affected the entire world, and every single country took a huge hit. Their economy took a huge hit. High levels of unemployment, high levels of inflation. Some countries experienced double-digit inflation from where they have not been able to recover yet. They have not been able to reduce that rate of inflation. Because of high expenditure, because of high inflation, high fiscal deficits, the entire supply chain across the world had been disturbed. Even now it has not fully recovered. So this was a huge shock of the pandemic. Every country took a hit, including India. But India took certain measures through which we were able to recover from that and become the fastest growing economy in the whole world. So India's economics suffered from financial year 21 due to the global pandemic. Real GDP contracted by 5.8% in 2020-21. This is a very big figure. Real GDP contracting by 5, because it takes 3 to 4 years to build this, and it is contracting in one single year. Alright. However, the government's policies of fiscal, monetary and health supported India's economic recovery. What exactly did the government do in order to reduce its deficits, in order to recover the economy, in order to provide the health solution, because COVID was a health crisis. It led to a loss of lives of multiple millions and millions of people. But Indian economy post-COVID, which is financial year 2022-23 and 23-24, which has just ended, India bounced back due to, again, its fiscal and monetary policies. We showcased the ability to bounce back and convert challenges into opportunities. So in 2023-24, it was already estimated, not by India or Indian agencies, but by global agencies, trustworthy agencies like IMF and World Bank, that India would grow at a rate of 7%, probably more. And now when finally the financial year 23-24 is over, now India has grown at 7.3%. This is a huge rate of growth. We have surpassed the expectations that were set from us, which also should be the case, and this is what India has achieved. So the economy is estimated to have grown 7.3%. Urban unemployment rate declined to 6.6%, but this is still there. The unemployment that was created during COVID, it was still existing. Heavy exports and low oil imports have resulted in lowering India's current account deficit. The current account deficit is a deficit which is also called as a trade deficit. The deficit which happens when we import and export goods and services from other countries. When we import from other countries goods and services, when we export to other countries goods and services. So low oil imports, I would not call them low, I would call them a little controlled, because oil imports, again, when the economy is back in action, you need oil. So oil has to be imported. But the source of oil was a little different. We started purchasing oil from Russia because Russia provided oil. After the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia started to provide oil at a cheaper rate. So this is something that happened. Because of India's focus on Make in India campaign, the exports have started to rise. And now India has become the largest exporter of mobile phones in the world, one of the largest exporters of mobile phones in the world. So our current account deficit reduced to 1% of GDP in the first half of FY 2024. Airports doubled in last 9 years. Infrastructural development. When it comes to infra, there are certain things which have been path breaking for the tourism industry, for the logistics industry, for the communication industry, like the entry of 5G. In order to promote tourism, we have more trains, we have more airports, we have more Vande Bharat Express, we have more airports. They have doubled in last 9 years from 74 to 150. Increase in universities. When it comes to education in 10 years, from 723 to 1113. Increase in AIMS institutions. The gross enrollment ratio for girls is 27.9 in 2020. 2020 was actually a year in which there was a very high dropout rate also. So I don't know whether the students have come back to schools. Reforms to resolve the twin balance sheet problem. This is a very big problem that happened, that was always there in India. I will explain what this problem is. It still exists in India, and post-COVID, it could have become bigger, but it was sort of controlled. So the commerce background students would know how a balance sheet is prepared, but other students who don't know, listen to me carefully. A typical format of a balance sheet, this is balance sheet. Let's say balance sheet of a bank, and this is balance sheet of a company. All right. Balance sheets show liabilities at one end and assets on the other. So liabilities and assets on the other. When bank gives a loan to the company, bank is giving a loan to the company, it is an asset for the bank. Loan to company, it's an asset to the bank. Loan has been given to a company. If loan has been given to a company, it becomes a liability on the company. It's an obligation, it's a liability. Loan from bank. All right, loan from bank. It becomes a liability on the company. So what happens is that when a company is not able to repay the loan back, when the company is not able to give back the loan, it becomes a twin balance sheet problem. This is called as a twin balance sheet. One balance sheet, second balance sheet, it has become a problem. How? Because this balance sheet is ruined because he is not able to repay the loan, bank is not able to recover his asset, and this also spoils the balance sheet because it becomes an NPA. When it becomes an NPA, then what do you have to do? You have to resort to Basel norms requirement, capital adequacy ratio. You have to resort to recapitalization. Recapitalization means the government of India giving you money in order to fulfill your losses, which means basically the taxpayer pays for your losses. This is called the twin balance sheet problem. Recapitalization and merger of public sector banks, this is what happened. But I am glad about one thing, government of India did not do much recapitalization. It did not give much money. Merger of public sector banks, yes. How many banks used to be there? There used to be 27 public sector banks, and like a bigger bank, SBI and all its associates have been merged into one. So 7 banks have been merged into one. Now it is considered to be one bank. So just like that, 27 public sector banks have been reduced to 12, merger. If the balance sheet of one bank was not proper, it has been merged or it has come within the jurisdiction, within the umbrella of a bigger bank. So now a bigger bank would look after the management and operations of the smaller bank, right? Recapitalization and merger. Insolvency and bankruptcy code. This is also to solve the problem of people who are not able to repay the loans that they have taken from the banks. They have become insolvent. Insolvency basically means that you are not able to repay. I am not able to repay, I am insolvent. Bankrupt means I will never be able to repay. The company is bankrupt, it has gone for bankruptcy. Now whatever can be recovered of whatever I have, that would be sold and creditors would be given the money. So IBC was brought, it came into place. IBC rescued 2808 corporate debtors. 2800 corporate debtors, they were rescued. So reforms to resolve TBS problem, this was a driver of India's growth. So this is something that the government of India tried to do. TBS, a twin balance sheet, is a scenario where banks are under severe stress and the corporates are over leveraged to extent that they cannot repay their loans. So two balance sheets get spoiled. Then the second driver was engagement of the government with the private sector. Look, any country can only grow if the private sector comes to the fore, or when the private sector is given the freedom to come to the fore. The new public sector enterprise policy for Atmanirbhar Bharat has been introduced, which is very good. The public sector policy is that public sector enterprises have been given the freedom, and the public sector, along with public sector enterprises, such sectors have been opened for the private sector. Make in India programs to enhance India's manufacturing capabilities and exports across industries. This is something which is hugely ambitious for the present government about Make in India campaign. Because unless and until you manufacture, you cannot treat the path of development in the long term. You can probably show development for 1 year, 2 years, but that's a one-night wonder. If you want to develop, if you want to have a long-term impact like China, in that particular case, you need to have a robust, strong, stable manufacturing sector, which I'm sorry to say, no government before this worked upon. No government actually worked upon developing the manufacturing sector. We were thriving on first the primary sector, post-liberalization on the tertiary sector. Production linked incentive scheme again. So this is also like the incentive production. If you come to, this is also to promote Make in India campaign. If any person, let's say I have to manufacture, I want to manufacture in India, government of India gives me incentives. Incentives in the form of rebates, taxation rebates on my profits. If any foreign manufacturer comes and wants to manufacture in India, that person would also be given rebates. Production linked incentive. If you produce in India, you will be given an incentive, are being provided to firms to attract domestic and foreign investments and to develop global champions in the manufacturing industry. So PLI scheme to unlock India's manufacturing capacity. Look how many sectors have been granted the PLI scheme. The steel sector, textile, drones, electronics majority, which is why India has become one of the largest assemblers of mobile phones. And it starts from Samsung, the unit of Samsung. It's very close to my place. It's like just 50 kilometers from here. And the Foxconn plant. So electronics. And India has also become one of the largest exporters of mobile phones. Followed by that, auto components, automobile, pharma sector, solar PV modules, telecom and networking, food products, steel, textile. All of these sectors have been linked to production linked incentive scheme. Then we come to the MSME sector. This is one of the most highly required and a very, very important sector for Indian economy. Unless and until any government focuses on the MSME sector, you cannot develop, because this particular sector takes care of itself. So government of India, in order to revive the MSME sector, this was in fact given the largest allocation under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package. That was a revival package during COVID in order for this industry to function, MSME sector. So let me give you certain statistics. We have over 60 million MSME units in India. 60 million means 6 crores. And 6 crore MSME units, they give employment to almost 12 crore people. And this sector was out of the credit ambit of the banks. They did not get loans at a subsidized rate of interest. So the number of recognized startups have increased to more than 98,000 in 2023 from 452 in 2016. MSME sector. MSME sector, this is the sector, this is actually the backbone. Backbone is not the big companies that you see, the fancy companies and their financial reports that you read in the newspapers. Backbone of the country is this, the MSME sector. This basically holds the country from the back, which is why the government is able to focus on more important things like defense, like atomic energy, like space research, like international relations. Why? Because these people, 12 to 14 crore people, are taking care of themselves. So MSME sector should be looked after with a proper policy, with proper allocation and proper credit. And this can only be done by the government of India. Logistics and infrastructure. Logistics, when we talk about logistics, as we have seen, that number of airports have doubled. Earlier, we had the capacity of making roads roads including normal roads, highways, expressways, whatever, to the tune of 17 kilometers per day, which has increased to more than 34 kilometers per day. So unless and until you can transport or you can move, you will not be able to develop, you will not be able to commute, you will not be able to even promote tourism. Number of airports being doubled, highway capacity building being doubled, number of trains that are being run, good high quality trains such as the trains that we see in Europe or US, better than those trains, 400 Vande Bharat trains. So these are the things which are being developed along with ports. New ports have come into play, existing ports have been linked well, so trade can happen properly. Dedicated programs for road connectivity, Bharat Mala project, Sagar Mala project, port connectivity, Air Routes Udan scheme, Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik, National Logistics Policy 2022. The capital expenditure has risen to 4.5% from 2.8%, almost not doubled but 1.5x. So this requires, and this is something which is a capital expenditure, it is going to give you long-term returns. Let me just give you a little trivia. The contribution of the MSMEs, look at this. 11 crore jobs, 22 to 23% of total employment in India is just given by the MSME sector. 15% of MSMEs are registered with the Udyam portal. This portal has been made for the MSME sector to register in order to take a loan. In fact, MSME loan is the easiest. You know, there was a program by the government which stated that loan in 59 minutes. MSME loan will be given to you in 59 minutes. The loans that were given via the Mudra Yojana. Mudra was basically opened for the MSME sector. If you do not know what are the employment figures, just see how many loans have been given via Mudra Yojana. You will be able to understand that at least one person is giving employment to only one other person. So one MSME means two people. 6 crore MSME means 12 crore people. We are taking 11 crore as a count. It is huge employment, right? About 1.1 crore MSMEs are registered with GST, which means that they are GST enabled. 30% to country's GDP, almost $1 trillion, 45% of manufacturing output and 48% of country's exports. All this trivia, all these facts are important for your examination. Please remember about the MSME sector. Now they have increased, so this number has reduced post-COVID. 90 million MSMEs in the country. Now this number has reduced, so roughly you can imagine around 60 million MSMEs in the country. Inclusive welfare policies. Over 10 crore women have been given free gas connections. This is free LPG or give up LPG subsidy. 11.72 crore toilets and 2.6 crore Pakka houses have been built for the poor. 6.27 crore hospital admissions have been done under Ayushman Bharat scheme, which is obviously the health sector scheme. Under health, you should also remember that more than 20 AIIMS-like institutions now exist in India, and they have also more than doubled. 6.27 crore people have been given benefits under Ayushman Bharat scheme. Highly important. This is what you should know. It means these many people are getting health benefits, medical benefits via Ayushman Bharat card. So Ayushman Bharat is the largest healthcare sector insurance scheme in the world. It covers around 40 to 50 crore beneficiaries to the tune of 5 lakh rupees per family. That is the insurance cover, and that is guaranteed by the government. You know, the best thing about this, even private sector hospitals are covered under Ayushman Bharat. It's not just government sector hospital. So you can take your Ayushman Bharat card to a private hospital and they will be able to treat you well. Impact of GST. Now GST. How do you know that your economy is growing? How do you know that your goods and services are selling in your country? By tax collections. When the government of India says that GST collections have improved, what does it mean? GST is a tax which is a tax on consumption. मतलब अगर मैं कुछ खरीदता हूँ, कंज्यूम करता हूँ, कुछ खाना पीना, कंजम्पशन, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, वाईफाई, कंप्यूटर, कैमरा, स्मार्ट बोर्ड, कुछ भी, रेस्टोरेंट, मेट्रो ट्रैवल, प्लेन ट्रैवल, ट्रेन ट्रैवल, हर चीज पे जीएसटी लगता है. क्योंकि मैंने कुछ कंज्यूम करा तो मैंने कुछ खर्चा करा होगा. जो मैंने खर्चा करा है, वॉट एवर एक्सपेंडिचर आई हैव डन, दैट एक्सपेंडिचर हैज गिवन मी गवर्नमेंट द जीएसटी. आई हैव पेड जीएसटी. So if the GST collections are increasing, it means the consumption is increasing. The GST collections, since the time GST has come, not since then, but since pre-COVID, 2019 to 2023, the collection of GST has increased from 90,000 crores a month to over 150,000 crores a month. So number of GST taxpayers have increased from 66 lakhs to 1.4 crore, more than double. This is very good. People should pay GST. Monthly gross collection increased from 90 lakh crores to 1.5 lakh crores, over 1.5 lakh crores. In certain months, this has gone up to 1.9 lakh crores, but average is 1.5 lakh crores in FY23. So GST ensures free flow of goods and goods across states, which led to the formalization of the economy. And GST has enhanced the tax base. This is also called tax buoyancy. Tax buoyancy has happened because number of tax payers have increased from 66 lakhs to 1.4 crores. So this is a month-on-month analysis from April to March. If you have a look at it, so this is for 6 months, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. If you look at the GST collections, 2023, the yellow bar indicates 2023-24 as compared to previous year 2020-21-22 or 2022-23 to 2023-24, it has increased. In April, it increased from 1,67,000 crores to 1,87,000 crores. Consumption increased by 20,000, so it resulted into a tax revenue of 20,000 crores. Look, 1,87,000 crores, way beyond 1.5 lakh crores. Then further, every month it has increased. Look at this, every month it has increased. So last being November data, 1,67,000 crores. So GST collections increasing basically means more people have been brought in the ambit, which means more and more sectors are being organized and people are paying GST. The notable achievements, especially post-COVID, penetration of internet significantly via multiple schemes to link all the Gram Panchayats via National Optical Fiber Network. DBT, direct benefit transfer, over 34 lakh crores transferred to more than 1167 crore beneficiaries. 1167 crore, it does not mean, so basically it is not, this is 11.67 crore beneficiaries. 34 lakh crores have been transferred. 56% of Jan Dhan account holders are women. This is a very big achievement. This is the biggest scheme for financial inclusion. 2/3 of these accounts are in rural and semi-urban areas. 221 crore COVID vaccination done to population aged 18 plus. This was, the first dose was on the government paid for it. 1.3 crore candidates have received training under Kaushal Vikas Yojana, which is the largest skill enhancement program. So just to look at certain data, internet users in India forecast until 2025. Earlier they were 243 million, which is roughly 24 crores. By 2024, it has risen to 89 crores. To 2000, and it will rise to further 97 crores in this year, and next year it will increase to 100 crores. So you can just see the penetration of internet and what wonders can it do. India's social media users skyrocketed by 48% or 13 crore between April 2019 and January 2020. And COVID, it would have more than doubled because people did not have any work, scrolling through social media, Insta. This is what happened. After 75 years of independence, in the last 25 years is termed as Amrit Kal. 25 years till 2047, 1947, 2047. The last 25 years are called as Amrit Kal. Looking ahead, journey of Amrit Kal, what all do we need to do? First is that the target of the government is to make Indian economy into a $5 trillion economy. Hence, reforms have to be undertaken and the foundation has to be set for India to become the third largest economy. Going forward, India embarks on Amrit Kal journey with confidence, supported by macroeconomic stability or macroeconomic factors and financial stability. So GDP growth in current prices from 87 to 2028, how has it taken place? So you can see $1,700 billion, $1,700 billion in 2009, 2015, $2,294 billion, 2023, 3.73, $3,700 billion. $3,700 billion means 3.73 trillion. 2024, we have already surpassed to become a $4 trillion economy, $4.1 trillion economy. And by 2027, we are estimating to become a $6 trillion economy. So these are the facts that you need to memorize, you need to remember. This PDF you will find along with the lecture. I have also included some practice questions from the same document that the Government of India has released. Please focus on at least this much information. You don't have to focus on the raw document. It is about 70 to 80 pages. This much information you need to remember. This is more than sufficient. Let's have a look at the practice questions. Consider the following economic activities Which of the following pairs are correctly indicate growth in the economy? Decrease in unemployment rate, increase in volume of e-way bill generation, increase in rail freight traffic, increase in port cargo traffic, increased steel consumption. So basically this is worded wrong. How have these things taken place, or how have these things happened? Look, decrease in unemployment rate, this has taken place. Increase in the volume of e-way bill generation, yes. Rail freight traffic, yes. Port cargo traffic, yes. Increase in steel consumption. D for Delhi is correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Consider the following statements. Which of these factors would be important in order to revive the economy? It would be helpful in reviving the faltering economy. What would be done, or what can be done? You tell me. Increase in domestic private consumption. Would this help in reviving the faltering economy post-COVID? Geopolitical shocks due to war. Would this be helpful in reviving the economy? No, I don't think so. Monetary tightening of US Fed Reserve. Would this help in tightening the economy? Hawkish monetary policy by RBI, sluggish global demand. How many of the above given situations will help in reviving the economy? Only domestic private consumption. Rest, none of the factors are going to help our economy in revival. None of the factors. So A, 1 only is correct. Consider the following statements. India has achieved its goal of reducing the emission intensity of its GDP by 33% from 2005 level by the year 2019. So India has achieved its goal by reducing emission intensity. India has already met the target of achieving about 40% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel based energy resources by 2030. Factual statements. This question can be asked because India's focus, or the world's focus, is on green climate and green energy. So both the statements are correct. India has already met the target of about 40% cumulative electric power installed capacity of non-fossil fuel, which means renewable energy power. It includes solar, hydel, tidal, wind, etc. All these energy sources. And India has achieved the goal of reducing the emission intensity of its GDP by 33%. Look at this question. NLP 2022 aims to modernize infrastructure. What is the potential long-term impact of this policy? National Logistics Policy. Logistics की policy का क्या impact हो सकता है? Immediate increase in FDI in all sectors, short-term disruption in domestic supply chains, long-term enhancement of India's competitiveness in global demand, increased reliance on imported technology and expertise. Our reliance on imported technology and expertise, enhancement of India's competitiveness in the global market. C is correct. Our enhancement in the global market should be good. So C is correct. Which of the following statements are not correct? Highly important. FY 13 to 23, India's merchandise exports grew by more than 50% and services exports by 120%. Can be true. Over the years, there has been a decrease in the diversification of India's export basket. Yes, this is also true. India is the largest recipient of worker remittances in the world. This is definitely true. Software services exports comprise almost half of service exports consistently. So you just imagine that this is something, almost half of the service exports consistently. There is a possibility that this statement is a little incorrect, because yes, exports comprise almost half of the service exports consistently. This is something that we are exporting. But is this happening consistently? This word consistently makes it, or creates a doubt. Over the years, there has been a decrease in the diversification of India's export basket. Decrease word is wrong. Hence, option B is incorrect. Had it been increased, it would have been correct. So here, this was the Indian economy, a review document released officially by the government of India. I hope you have been able to understand. Please remember these details. Please make sure that you keep revising them again and again. It is highly important for you to revise such a document. All right. Thank you so much.